Martin Heidegger's Being in Time. Yeah, it's got a reputation for being one of the toughest books in all of philosophy. But what if I told you its main idea is actually a really powerful, really practical question about how you're living your life right now? Today, we're going to crack open some of his biggest ideas, and honestly, you might be shocked at how much they hit home. So let's get into it. So let's just start with the big one, the question Heidegger is basically asking all of us. Are you an active participant, an actor in your own story? Or are you kind of just watching it all happen from the sidelines, like a spectator? Keep that question in your back pocket, because everything we're about to talk about circles right back to it. All right, here's our game plan. First, we'll look at the old way of thinking that Heidegger was trying to tear down. I'm calling it the spectator problem. Then we'll dive into his solution, this huge idea of being in the world. We'll make that super concrete with his famous example of tools. Then shift gears to how we deal with other people, and finally, we'll land on the ultimate choice we all have to make, living an authentic life or not. Okay, so to really get what Heidegger was doing, you first have to understand what he was fighting against. For hundreds of years, philosophy had this one particular way of seeing our relationship to the world, and Heidegger thought it was totally wrong. Just think about the philosopher René Descartes. You can picture him, right? Sitting in his study, looking at a ball of wax, analyzing it. He's a detached mind, totally separate from the physical world he's observing. For him, the world is a show, a spectacle. And Heidegger comes along and says, no, that is the completely wrong place to start. We aren't spectators looking at a world out there. We are always already in it. We are actors, not observers. Yeah, this old view basically says our relationship with the world is like water in a glass. They're just two separate things that happen to be next to each other. It creates this huge artificial gap between us and the world and makes our real lived connection to everything feel, well, impossible. Heidegger says we've got to throw that map out and draw a new one. And that new map? It starts with one of his most famous, most fundamental ideas. It's a completely different way of seeing what it means for us to even exist. So Heidegger comes up with this special term for the way humans exist, Dasein. It literally just means being there. Now here is the absolute key. Dasein isn't a what. You're not a thing with a fixed set of properties like a chair or a rock. No, Dasein is a who. Your very existence is this open-ended question, an issue that you are constantly having to deal with through the choices you make every single day. And this quote just nails it. To be human is to constantly be taking a stand on who you are. Every choice, big or small, from what you do for work to whether you hit the snooze button, is you making a statement about what kind of person you are. We aren't just sitting in the world, we are actively engaged with it, and that engagement is what defines us. Okay, I know that's all a little bit up in the clouds. So, how does this whole being in the world thing actually feel in our day-to-day lives? Well, Heidegger gives us this absolutely brilliant, down-to-earth example using tools. He says there are two basic ways we encounter things in the world. Most of the time, things are ready to hand. Think about a carpenter using a hammer. She's not thinking about the hammer, it's just an extension of her arm. It's part of the flow of the activity. It's only when something goes wrong, say the hammer breaks, that it suddenly becomes present at hand. Now it's not a tool anymore. Now it's just an object that she stares at, analyzing its properties like weight, wood, and metal. And this moment of breakdown is everything. It's that jarring moment where we switch from being an absorbed actor inside the world to a detached spectator staring at it. The smooth, easy flow is shattered, and we're forced to just stop and look. This is the only time we're really like Descartes and his ball of wax. For Heidegger, this whole detached observer thing is actually a secondary, broken way of being, something that only happens when our normal, engaged life gets interrupted. And here's the really cool part. When that hammer breaks, it's not just the hammer that shows up. All of a sudden, the carpenter was aware of the whole workshop. The nails that are now useless, the piece of wood she was working on, the whole project, the house she's building. The breakdown of one little thing suddenly reveals this entire web of relationships and purposes that we're normally just swimming in without a second thought. The world announces itself. So that's our relationship with things. But what about our relationship with other people? This is where Heidegger's analysis gets really personal and maybe a little uncomfortable. Heidegger says that most of the time our lives are dominated by this powerful, anonymous force he calls the they. In German, it's das Mann. And you can think of it as the one in phrases like, one should do this or one shouldn't do that. It's the voice of public opinion, of social media, of common sense. It's everyone and yet no one in particular. I mean, you hear the voice of they all day, every day. It's that background hum that tells us what to want, what to think, how to act. It kind of averages everything out, makes everything comfortable and normal, and it actually saves us from the hard work of making our own choices. We just do what one does. And this leads to a pretty shocking conclusion. For the most part, the self we are in our daily lives isn't really our own self. It's a they self. Our identity gets scattered and absorbed into the crowd. Heidegger calls this state inauthenticity. And he's not saying it's morally bad. It's more like we're living on autopilot, letting our lives be dictated by this anonymous they instead of by ourselves. So if we're lost in the crowd, living on autopilot, how in the world do we find ourselves? How do we switch from this inauthentic life to an authentic one? Well, Heidegger says you can't just think your way there. It takes a radical shift in your entire mood. And that mood is anxiety. Now, for Heidegger, anxiety is not a psychological problem you need to fix. It's a deeply philosophical state of being. It's different from fear. Fear always has an object. You're afraid of something specific, like a spider. But anxiety has no object. You're just anxious. And what you're anxious about is the world itself and your own place in it. And that's why anxiety is so important. In that moment of pure anxiety, all the distractions, all the chatter of the they, it all just melts away. You're stripped of your comfortable social roles, and you're forced to confront yourself as this lone, individual being full of possibility. Anxiety yanks you back from the crowd and shows you crystal clear that you have a choice. It shows you that authenticity and inauthenticity are real options for you. And this confrontation with yourself leads you straight to the most individualizing thought of all, your own death. Now, Heidegger isn't trying to be morbid. His point is that your death is the one possibility in your life that is absolutely 100% yours. No one can do it for you. No one can take it away from you. Facing that ultimate limit forces you to see your life as this finite, precious whole, a limited amount of time where you have to choose who you're going to be. And that brings us to authenticity. Being authentic isn't about being a rebel or trying to be different just for the sake of it. It's the quiet, determined act of taking full responsibility for your one life. It means making your choices with the clear-eyed awareness that your time isn't infinite and that those choices are ultimately yours and yours alone. It's the move from letting the they live your life to actually living it for yourself. So we end up right back where we started, but now, hopefully, we see the question in a whole new light. Heidegger's philosophy isn't some dusty old theory. It's a direct challenge to you. It says your existence isn't a fact. It's a project. Your life is an open possibility. So the final question isn't Heidegger's anymore. It's yours. What will you choose to make of it?